Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nannette Nocon and thank you for joining us. In this segment, I'm excited to introduce you to Bruce Barnes, who is the Ron and Donna Fielding Director at the George Eastman Museum. Some of you know the museum as the George Eastman House for many years, but it's appropriately called the George Eastman Museum, and we'll hear from Bruce Barnes today. Bruce, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, Nannette, thank you so much for the invitation.
I'm delighted to have you because of all the addition of the visitor center at the George Eastman Museum, and wanted you to talk about that and what's happening at the George Eastman Museum these days.
Great. Well, thank you. We're thrilled. I'm gonna talk about two different major capital projects that we managed to get done last year in spite of all of the challenges that came with COVID. And the first is our most important restoration project since the restoration of the mansion in 1990, which is the restoration of the colonnade that runs from George Eastman's dining room to the Palm House, which is a necessary part of the route if you come to the museum to getting into the mansion. And it had fallen into quite a bit of disrepair, but let me show you what it looked like during George Eastman's life, shortly after the house was built. You can see it was an open colonnade during most of the year with columns and just open air. And what we wanted to try to do is return to that feeling. But of course, because we're a museum, we can't just have it open air. So we used a glass system that allows us to have these very, very large panes of uninterrupted glass, so that you have an uninterrupted view of the exterior from the colonnade, just as you would have, or George Eastman would have during his life. So the garden right now this is sort of the garden in winter with a lot of plants removed because we were doing construction. But you see, you'll have a beautiful view into the garden. This long walk, all of this has been restored. We had to completely redo the floor, which has a walkway underneath it. We had to completely redo the roof structure. The only thing that really stayed were the columns, but we were very true to George Eastman's original vision. And we have a new set of panels that interpret our three different gardens. So we're using it also as a space where our visitors can become better educated about the museum and its gardens.
It's beautiful and plenty of light. Great.
Yeah, no, it's a spectacular space, and some of the people who visited us before may remember that it was kind of cold in there during the winter, and it was kind of hot in there during the summer. And now it's actually beautifully climate controlled, which is much better for our visitors and also much better for our collections and for the mansion. So we're absolutely thrilled and very grateful to everyone who supported it, particularly Bruce Bates. And then the really exciting project in terms of our visitors' experience is the opening of the new Thomas Tisher Visitor Center, which is seen here as if you were driving in. And people may remember that it used to be that you would park in our parking lot and you'd have a rather long walk down to the main entrance to the museum, which was on the University Avenue end of the museum. And the weather's not always nice in Rochester, so it wasn't always a nice walk. And the objective of this project was to create a more welcoming, convenient, accessible entrance for all of our visitors, and really sort of completely transform the experience that people have when they're entering. So this is the parking area. That right there is the parking area for handicap parking. And then we created or recreated a colorama. Colorama, you may remember, was Eastman Kodak Company's advertising campaign in Grand Central Station. And we've recreated a version of that. This is actually an image that they used of the Taj Mahal. And this is a view sort of across the way, going from the Colorama on the left to the Dryden Theater on the right. approaching the new entrance. And this, the new glass pavilion there is the ESL Federal Credit Union Pavilion. And you enter and have now a welcome desk right there, both for people who are visiting as museum visitors, as well as people who are our staff members or people who are visiting our staff members. The far end there is the Dryden Theater. And then we have the Walk Concourse, which is really the main thoroughfare to getting into the museum. On the left, there is a photograph of George Eastman as a relatively young man, and some more interpretive materials on the left side as you go down. And on the right is our bookshop and our new cafe. This is looking back from the other end of the Walk Concourse. And then we have a new multi-purpose hall. This is in the space that used to be the Curtis Theater. This was originally George Eastman's stables, and we've turned it into a great new space where we're actually able to show films. We're showing moving image works throughout the open hours of the museum, but it's also a great event space, lecture hall, et cetera, very flexible space. Beautiful new focused bookshop, and a wonderful new cafe area. And the cafe is actually, it's a new version or iteration of Open Face, which many people may remember from the South Wedge, was on South Avenue with Jared Valentine being the chef and owner there. So he's partnered with us in this space, brought back a lot of people's old favorite recipes. And we're thrilled because we actually have a few dozen people on average each day coming to visit the museum just to have lunch in the cafe. This photograph is from when we were doing more social distancing. So there are more chairs now than there are here. And then we've incorporated the Palm House to add additional seating. And again, there's more seating there now. The Palm House is a beautiful space, light-filled space that George Eastman used to grow palms. But it's actually a very, very pleasant space, has wonderful views of the gardens, and a wonderful place for people to have lunch and look outside and have a nice light-filled, quiet lunch, enjoyable lunch. And the food is absolutely fantastic. It's where I eat every single day of the week, or except Monday when we're closed. So that's what we've been doing. We're tremendously grateful to everyone who supported both of the projects. The Colonnade was a $2 million project, and the new visitor center was actually about a $5.7 million project, which we've fully funded through the generosity of local individuals, corporations, foundations, as well as support from New York State.
And may I add, it sounds like this from concept to completion was a relatively short amount of time, right?
It was remarkable. Yeah, it's actually interesting because the Colonnade took longer because of all sorts of challenges associated with it than the visitor center took. The visitor center from conception to completion was about 3 years and 4 months or something like that. So we worked very quickly. And we're fortunate enough to be able to get the support we needed, and then really, really grateful to everyone who worked through the COVID crisis, and we're able to do a beautiful job on the building in spite of the challenges that came to construction during that period of time.
That's great. It's nice to see also that the museum continued to have visitors come, except for a few months, right?
Yeah, we had only a very short period of, well, we were closed when we were required to be closed, of course, but we only had a short period of time when we had to close because of construction. And I've been really tremendously satisfied because, or gratified, because people who are coming in now are remarking about how different the experience is, how thrilled they are to see the space. So, and it's just it's a much more welcoming experience, and offers a lot of nice amenities like the new cafe and the bookshop. So I encourage people to come and see it, and see the real reason why you would be coming, of course, is to see the mansion and to see our photography exhibitions or the films in the Dryden, but it's a much more pleasant environment to come through and to spend time in now.
And I think it's also a terrific environment to be in a cold winter day when there's sunshine. It's just really a phenomenal space. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the light in the space was very well done. And I should mention actually the American Institute of Architects Rochester chapter gave an award to the new visitor center.
Very nice. So Bruce, if our audience want to visit, tell us about ways to visit as well as the cost of visiting and how can people in the area and other guests come and visit the museum.
Sure. So our favorite way to have people come and visit is to become a member of the museum. And of course, if you're a member of the museum, then admission is free. But we are open Tuesdays through Sundays. And we have some special programs in terms of free admission, both for active duty military personnel and their families are free year-round. And also anyone who is a holder of a SNAP card or an EBT card, which are the public benefit, basically the food stamp type programs. Those individuals can come free and can bring their families for free. So what we want to do is make sure that if it's something where you need assistance to be able to afford to eat, we don't want to have that be a barrier to people coming and visiting us. And we also want to be thankful to the people who are serving our country in the military.
Very nice. So tell us a little bit about what you see ahead for the museum.
Well, we have a number of preservation projects that are going on. And then one of the things that I'm very excited about that I hope we'll have done in about 2 years or so from now is a new set of galleries that are dedicated to interpreting George Eastman from a contemporary perspective and a balanced perspective. We right now, if you get a tour of the museum by a docent, we don't have docent-led tours right now because of COVID, but if you have a docent tour or if you do an audio tour, you'll learn a lot about George Eastman. But for people who come and they just walk through the mansion, there aren't really galleries that give a lot of background on George Eastman. So we're going to create a set of galleries on the first floor of the mansion in some unrestored spaces that we're currently using as offices that will give people background on George Eastman and his entrepreneurship and contribution to Rochester and around the world as a philanthropist. And on the second floor, we're creating a new set of galleries that will look at our incredible collection of photographic technology. It's the leading collection in the world, and present the history of photographs from the invention of photography through digital photography.
That sounds exciting. And I want to point out to our guests that the George Eastman Museum is an international museum, world-class truly in terms of its collections. And during the pandemic, you had more audience from around the world. Is that right?
We did actually. During the pandemic, we moved all of our programming online, and we actually increased the amount of programming that we were doing. That has continued. All of our programming is still available online. But we were finding that sometimes we might have a gallery talk that maybe could accommodate 20 or 25 people. In one case, it was a talk about early Kodak cameras, and we had 450 people from around the world who watched it live, and then hundreds more, I think actually thousands more, who watched it on delayed on YouTube.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I can't believe we've run out of time. I appreciate the tour of the museum, and we invite our guests to come visit the George Eastman Museum. Thank you again, Bruce Barnes, for being our guest, the Ron and Donna Fielding Director at the George Eastman Museum. And thank you, our guest. Until next time.